Just use a pen mostly today, pencil ready in case something comes up. Some simple shapes. Playing a game of transformation, evolution of those shapes would be our goal. Really paying attention to features of something, and then allowing those features to change over time over the space of the page. Exploration of transforming shape or form, changing over time and space. We have to decide on some form as our subject. You can kind of take this any way you like, so we'll use the warm up to maybe test out a few. My first inclination with the idea is just something without much to it at all, maybe even less round than that. But at first, just a little blob, not trying to be a circle, not giving too much directionality in any specific way, a little protoplasm element, but there's no reason this can't begin with something like a square, something more specifically defined, say a rounded triangular piece, a long bar-like piece, an ellipsoid, lozenge, or something. Any kind of shape will work. Maybe over the course of the page and exercise, multiple will come into play, and we'll see how the speed goes. But here, finding for yourself for a minute that proto shape, the base form, it might be a place to begin. Just the subtlest hint of features, whether that's the slight bump where the drawing starts and stops, or a little dent in or out there, will give us a starting point into forming something on the page. The larger format exercise would be taking those and using our eyes to recreate parts, embellish parts, slowly let that shape become something else, take on a little more character and figure as we go. I think the big entrance into it as a meditation is in tracking from one condition to the next and making decisions with the eye and the hand at the same time. I'll work from left to right, maybe in a diagonal for fun, but any order will work. Down, up to down, down to up, left, right. If you're left-handed, maybe right, left, avoid any overlap. So if you take a moment with the page before we engage it completely, let your comfortable or primary drawing hand just move around a little bit. Front side, back side, left, right. Just getting familiar with your space relative to that paper. Knowing if it's comfortable to draw over in an area where you might start, and comfortable to move in an area where you might end, just so you're not in a strange position, being aware of your surroundings. A nice starting point to reduce friction as we move along and bring all of our attention to that connection with the paper. Take yourself a couple of well-formed breaths, not necessarily super deep unless they feel nice, but just mindful of letting the air fill out and exhale a few times. As you'll feel ready, we'll make our first protoform on the paper, finding that place to start. Letting the pen come down and track something that you held with you from the warm-up. Maybe that little bumpy blob as a place to begin. We might come back through this over time and add features to it, maybe an inside shape or two, but we'll start just with an outline, giving form to the profile on the paper. And what we'll do as we move along is go in some direction, decide what roughly that is. Doesn't have to be a line, it can be curved or wobbly, and just a little bit over in that direction. Make a new version of this shape, transforming its boundaries a little bit. So perhaps a moment to retrace the current shape, to just become familiar with what ended up there, moving in and out, the corners or edges, the bumps or folds, whatever they may be. Choose a place of beginning. Trace even in the air, training the hand with the eye along there. Your goal is not reproduction, but transformation, so things can wobble, change. But beginning from your starting point, I'm going to add very slowly character to the features at play. Maybe that's a sharper cut in some areas, an extension of a bump out, but generally moving the eye and hand along what you see and changing it a little along the way. It doesn't have to get bigger necessarily. This doesn't happen to, but they might change size as they work across the paper. No right or wrong answers here, and take again some time to retrace, to feel the moves of that line, to allow the pen or pencils in precision as you move to add some thickness and change and character. Taking a couple passes over, maybe finding some opportunity to embellish some of that wobble, to reinforce some of the edges, really ground that figure on the page. And we'll begin again, but now starting to add in more attention to our pacing, breath, and our connection with that paper. That starting point can always change. I'm going to keep mine roughly the same to have kind of consistency and continue to enhance the feature definition. Maybe that's again extensions outward and inward, preferencing straighter curves. And as you draw, noticing the slow inhalation and exhalation, checking in to make sure that that's happening. As that high attention may draw us into a space of holding. The first time around, a lot of attention is drawn from the eye to the hand and keeping track of those motions. The second time around, we can now take our breath more as a guide and establish at the starting point with an inhalation. Begin the walk or journey around with an exhalation. Noticing when the breath runs out, slowing to begin again with a new inhalation. And moving at whatever speed feels aligned with your exhalation. This may happen a few times around. The first pass, noticing that replenishing inward breath and releasing outward breath. Feeling the ranges of comfort that may come with those for your own state, position, time. Make another pass across or around this shape, this time beginning to align that inhalation and exhalation with various features. So perhaps an inhalation at an inward moving dent, an exhalation at an outward moving bump, or something like that. And continue to become familiar with this iteration of the transforming figure. Riding the waves of the edges, riding the forms, features with the breath, aligning its rhythm and your own, establishing it more prominence on the paper. And we'll go until we kind of reach an end of space or room on the page, so it may depend on your paper. But at least a couple of more of these. You can always reposition somewhere else. The trajectory is not necessary. And again, this thing starts to take another form based on before. See if you can bring some of that inhalation, exhalation, inward and outward movement together in a fresh space. Even if you have to stop and pause along the way, taking an inhalation to begin. Continuing to ride around on the exhalation, bringing feature, perhaps new variables. Keeping a synchronization, that inhalation towards one feature and exhalation to the next. They may get back around. Realigning, positioning the self. Sometimes that's multi-layered concentration can be a little taxing. Take a few breaths and start the journey again, relearning this new configuration. Those slow movement exhalations, finding a place of return for an inhalation. Smooth on the out. Deep and replenishing on the in. Again, the pen or pencil does not have to continually move, so if there's places to pause, recollect, a lot of deep breathing can become its own tax on the system. Take a few normal breaths and begin again around the shape. The pacing of that breath, a guide for tracking with the eyes, tracking with the mind, engaging with the hand. And I have room for one more figure here before I start to run out of paper, and that has made an already significant change. So we'll do that in place and then come back through and see what we can find there. One more round of that engaged pacing of the breath and the movement of the hand. Inhaling to center yourself and find the place of beginning. When you're ready, on the top of that inhalation, exhaling to begin movement, to begin the exploration of new features. Seeing if you can remember and track what brought inhalation, what brought exhalation. And follow it. No worries or problem if you get off track. You can always pause for a moment, recollect, take a breath in, and begin on the journey again. And perhaps as the shape becomes more articulated, the cycles of breath change to map those features. My drawing having more little troughs, new chances for inhalations and replenishing. Moving along until the body or the breath give pause, reestablishing as needed and beginning again. Eventually finding our way back around to the beginning at whatever pace it takes you to make that journey. And retracing our steps a couple more times. In the retracing now, we can let the breath start to ease out, finding those moments of rest or pause where we inhale and slow down and maybe change the figure's edge, sort of riding the smoothness of the exhalation till it's comfortably emptied. Letting a little looseness come back into the breath, returning it to some of its autonomic control, becoming more of just the guide. I feel a need for replenishing here, and then I'll let the natural system take over for a minute. I feel a need for greater attention here. The breath in, and then slowly get absorbed into that attentiveness. And I began to make one more pass, as light as possible, just moving the pen, focus shifting away from the breath. You may notice it, but we're not controlling it. Really focusing on just moving the tip of that pen or pencil along generally the track laid before. Strengthening the edge of that figure, bringing it forward with thickness, perhaps a little wobble, becoming familiar with that profile. When that round comes to a close for you, taking some time to look over trajectory, changes made, the starting point, features expressed, just taking it in the page. Then we'll begin to layer back through this. The body relaxed, the body centered, full of oxygen, fueling the system, established in a rhythm of smoothness. We'll add some features. Those could be lines, small holes, shapes inside of shapes, some little moments on the outside, hairs, extensions, whatever draws you into the shape. I think I'll start with just a simple whole, a little thing within the thing, making a bit of a donut there, following the same general process or path, making the mark, noticing the mark, learning from the mark through a few iterations of tracking around it, noticing if there are alignments between features, and beginning to take those into the next version. Transformation, layered in transformation. Taking a few minutes to play and draw in the space there, looking for opportunities of reciprocity or bringing a high degree of contrast or difference to how you bring the different passes together of transformation, letting the thing gain definition. Enjoying some time in that space of forming and reforming for a few minutes of quiet drawing. New shapes, near old shapes. Start noticing maybe a story coming to mind, what happens with each piece from one moment to the next. In our final few minutes, we might then come through and start to add marks, hatch to give edge, definition, bringing layers of detail into the shape. I think I'll just stick with the pen and start to soften, texture some of the edges. The initial thing, simple, repetitive, and letting that texture grow and exaggerate, become a new entity across the space of the page. And this last portion for a few minutes, a chance to engage with some of our other senses, to connect physically back to the page and the hand, having been playing for a while, bringing our attention to where we are and what we're doing and how we're doing it. So whatever definition you might bring to these, using that to feel the fingertips. For me, making many small little marks, small bursts of sensation to the nerve endings. Feel the position, working around a strange shape. Puts the hand, fingers into new, novel, sometimes natural, sometimes uncomfortable feeling positions. Noticing the different positions effect on the finger's grip, the dynamic possibility of adaptation as we work around being able to change, align, shift, fine tuning our adjustments to the paper. Notice how those adjustments not only track through the local kind of fingertip and finger muscle control, where you might feel the most engagement, the development of fatigue or sensation, but also up through the wrist, having to shift the joint's action a little bit each time. Out from the wrist into the forearm, and maybe the page bring steadiness there. Or perhaps when you get to a really strange location and orientation, you notice the shoulder and elbow adjusting, realigning, a difference perhaps from the beginning towards the end. The light, repetitive action, shading, hatching, marking, activating a constant shift. Attention to the body. Maybe made it up through our arm. We can start to broaden that. The hand knows how to make these marks. The eye generally tracking lightly, well engaged and trained over the course of the exercise on these figures and forms. The technique established in the last couple minutes. We broaden our sensation, noticing the shoulder girdle, just maybe moving it a little bit, letting that external movement bring a little of character and change to the fine control. Moving around your offhand, which it's like mine has kind of been sitting here for a while, just resting, letting it become re-engaged to the form of action, and perhaps moving the back, the hips a little bit. If you can move a little side to side in your chair, you're standing, let your feet get involved and feel a shift in weight through the whole system. And start taking a few deep breaths to feel that motion through the whole body. You can keep the pen moving if you like, or bring it to a rest when you feel a place of general completion in some of the engagement. We've given ourselves that exercise to do a few things at once. Bring attention to the breath, bring attention to the motion of the hand and the body. We can let that relax into just an attention of one thing. You even let some things unfinished, always returnable. And as this last 2 or 3 breaths reset, a quick focus inward, a nice release outward, and a reopening the mind, the senses, maybe the eyes, to whatever's out around you, to prepare to take the exercise with you to the rest of the day and look for transformation, iteration, and ways to institute change throughout your day and life. Thank you for joining. Good to see people. Strokes is fun. Signing off. Draw well.